Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is the first scene in a series of kind of explorations of different media that I'm going to get into. This is a series that I've been thinking about for quite some time now, and haven't gotten around to it. A lot of times I don't like stamping out the same thing over and over and over again, but it's really time that I do something like this, okay? A lot of people associate scenic stamping or Stampscapes usage in particular with this given type of look, okay? It's glossy cardstock and using a variety of dye-based inks, for the most part to achieve, most of the scene. I always use pigment inks and gel pens and alcohol pens for a little bit of embellishments on my scenes, but this is the general look people are thinking about, and rightfully so. I use this in a lot of my different scenes, okay? I have explored some different types of surfaces before, but scenic stamping in general, okay, as it applies to Stampscapes and other companies that use these, it's not about a specific medium, okay, or process or technique, okay? You can do the same composition. I can do it on matte paper and use colored pencils or chalks or watercolors or something like that. I can do the same scene. I can do them all in pigment inks and emboss it in silver, and it could be a Christmas card or a holiday card or something like that. And there's all kinds of various looks you can do with scenic stamping imagery. So the only difference is between a Lakeside Cove or something like that and a birthday cake is that one's nature, and one is probably more of an outline design. One thing that does differentiate my designs from other companies and a lot of types of images is that these images, they're for the most part, they're tonal. There's not a lot of linear edges around. They're not outlines, okay? So the way you combine these images are often a little bit different than how you combine other images that are more outline in kind of nature, no pun intended. So a lot of times, when you're combining images, you're layering outline images over the other ones. So you're doing a lot of masking. So the one thing that differentiates scenic stamping from other types of, a lot of other types of stamping processes is that you can overlap these designs without the use of careful masking, okay? But the way that you finish them, which is what this series is going to be about, is totally up to you, and you can use your favorite types of media and techniques and processes in the same way that you use it with other types of images, outlines and whatnot. And we'll try to get into a variety of these types of looks going forward in this series. I think I'm probably going to do, I don't know, a series of 15. I don't know if I'll do them all in a row because I might just get tired of and bored of the same composition right here, but we'll see what we can do in terms of a variety of looks. I plan to get into all the glossy paper types of looks, different color schemes, different times of day, different seasons using the same composition right here. I'll plan on doing the same composition on matte papers using soft media such as colored pencils and pastels, and I'll have to dip, way back into my school days of using things like charcoals and Conte crayons and graphite, and I'll see what I can do, with some of that types of things. Alcohol markers, dark papers using light colored inks like I just mentioned before. Perhaps some embossing. I haven't embossed in really quite a long time, but we'll see what kind of variations we can come up with. So this is a perfect opportunity if you want to do some stamp-alongs with these videos. I plan on keeping the processes fairly simple and quick. So these stamps right here, except for the reads large, all come in nature set number 8 as well. Okay, you can mix and match. I'm using the, the larger Lakeside Cove and Pines and Rocks, but you can also use the smaller one. Here's the smaller one right here. I don't know if I have my smaller Lakeside Cove image here, but those smaller versions come in nature set number 9, okay? And you can use, I don't know, different hanging branches if you want to, or if you have different types of grasses, you could put that in the foreground. Water pattern stamp, that one's a good one to go with. If you have something like a cloud or something like that, that can also be substituted, okay? And the inks that I use in this scene in particular, or in really any of the dye-based ones that I'm going with, I used Memento here, light, medium, and darker versions, and I used a little bit of gray. Mix and match if you have pads from other companies, but you don't have, the same line. You certainly don't have to be brand specific, as far as this goes. I wouldn't mix a dye-based light blue with a darker blue pigment ink or something like that. So stay with the same types of inks at least, but go ahead and mix and match your values if you need to complete kind of a value scale of a given hue. Okay, so anyways, first in a series of, I don't know, X amount of scenes that we'll get into, and we'll try to explore the different kind of personalities of this given composition right here. All right, so if you choose to watch this video or even choose to stamp along with it, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, the Lakeside Cove Lg. Media test, media exploration, number 1. Okay, let's see. Let's just do a really basic composition here. I'll stamp this on a 1/4 page card, 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches, glossy cardstock, dye-based ink. Get full pressure with this image, okay, so that you get a nice print in the middle here. Don't just hold the edges of whatever you're using, acrylic blocks, your stamp positioners of various brands or whatnot. Okay, so that is stamped right, I would say about a little bit under halfway down. You could stamp it lower, a little bit higher, a little bit lower if you want to. Okay. Pines and Rocks large here. And it's actually just called Pines and Rocks. There is a Pines and Rocks small, but this is this larger one. Dye-based ink again. Okay. You don't need a stamp positioner for this. 1/4 to a 1/2 page overlap from the first image, okay? Doesn't really matter. You don't want to stamp it too high, like something like this, right? You don't want to stamp it too, well, you could stamp it lower, but just don't stamp it higher, because these do represent trees that are a little bit closer to us just from the very scale of them, okay? So I'm overlapping probably about a 1/2 inch into my Lakeside Cove stamp. So these rocks right here are going to be overlapping some of these rocks right here, okay? And again, nice even pressure throughout the surface of the image, okay? Okay, let's put in a little bit of foreground here. This is the Reeds Large, okay? Some nice foreground foliage. If you don't have this one, if you have some other types of image, grassy imagery or whatnot, you can use that. Or you can just use another pine tree or something like that. You can even use the pine trees from over here to stamp a little bit of foreground, you know, to the left and right hand side of your scene. And let's do something with our oak branch, okay? Now, 3 of these images that I'm using, not the reeds, but the 3 that I'm using are in nature set number 8. I I always saw that as, one of the very kind of basic sets because of, it includes Lakeside Cove Lg, which is one of the more popular stamps in the line, and then it had Pines and Rocks, which is a really good foreground image. You can use it by itself, or with, its sibling imagery very nicely. Lakeside Cove, Lg looks great on its own as well. And in that set also comes Cloud Cumulus and Water Pattern, which are really good kind of basic images. Maybe I'll use the water pattern in this scene right here. Okay. All right, so we have our oak branch. I just used parts of it. A lot of people think, okay, well, what size card can I use this in? Does it have to be a really large scene? Well, if you're coming from, certain types of stamping where it would be strange just to use part of an image, well, nature designs are very universal in that you can use them in their entirety with their sibling imagery or with themselves. You can repeat this pattern over and over and over and get a really large extended cove line. You can just use this tree set right here and use it, across, an 11 by 17 piece of paper if you want to, or something of that sort, and it won't look out of place because there is repetition in nature, when we're talking about a forest or something like that. Very similar looking trees and whatnot and rocks, so it doesn't look out of the ordinary for repetition or partial bits of the imagery, just depending on what you want. This oak branch right here is kind of thicker down here, so I have thicker branches if you want a little more of a dense cluster of foliage, or you can use this back portion right here for a more airy portion. Let's say you have something going on in the background, but you want some foreground, but you don't want too much coverage like that, then you can use this side. So that's how this has been designed. Or the stamp can be used in its entirety, of course. This one right here is kind of fun to use in like a silver, embossing or something like that over dark cardstock, and it looks great. Okay, let's keep this image. We'll just go very basic with this one. Okay, this is the water pattern stamp right here, and a lot of people's idea, when they're doing a composition, is to use this water pattern in black, which you can do, certainly. But let's say my water is going to be a blue tone. What I like to do is I like to use that color, or a color out of my color scheme, in my water pattern. So if this body of water here is blue, then just like folds in a colored surface. You can see this is green. Maybe this isn't a great example because it's so dark, but oh, here. See, I can go like this and see there's just various versions of this green, depending on the lighting on it. So when I go like this, is this area down here or right here, is that black? No, it's just a darker version of green. That's here now in the reflection. So that's the concept here. Not that you can't use this in black though, but I like to use the colors out of my color scheme in a given area for things like textures, okay? Now this is a light blue right here. Okay, let's take a look and see if I can get that to focus in. It's very light, okay, because my area in here is going to be light. But I think I'm going to put some darker shadows in this area. So let's just take a darker blue. Okay, that was a Memento Summer Sky. This is Memento Bahama Blue, so, very pale blue. And a medium blue right here, okay? For those tones, okay? And I'm going to use the colors out of my color scheme for kind of a little bit of a head start in shading. So see what we have here? We have some lighter versions of that texture and some darker versions out here. And you can even go even darker. It depends on how dark your scene is going to get. Okay, so that is that. Now, easy enough, right? I hope you're not saying, oh, it's easy for you. Well, overlapping your imagery and not being super careful about placement by overlapping things, just using portions of your stamp. And my next segment is coloring, but not having to color within the lines or something like that. I hope that isn't seen as like a really difficult concept. It is a different concept, though, from outline designs, which a lot of stamping is. It's about stamping out some kind of little image that's designed with an outline and having to kind of color within the boundaries. Now, a lot of people feel safer around that, and they feel that this is kind of a different thing, and it's kind of a weird concept to them to kind of have that freedom. But once you do it, like, you know, for 10 seconds or something like that, I found that in my workshops, people were pretty much, you know, kind of liberated. Okay, you know, and where you have a form of stamping where being careful is not kind of needed, nor is it really conducive for the overall kind of look of this, okay? All right, now, these are dye-based inks that I'm using. Mementos are dye-based inks. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a simple color scheme right here, okay? Now, I'm going to use my same colors that I just used in that water pattern stamp to start off with, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'll, you know, in this series, and I will have explained that in the beginning introduction to this video, but I'll try to go through various media. You know, it'll be an exploration of media, you know, when all is said and done, but we'll also explore the same media and the different looks you can give an existing composition or a given composition using the same media, okay? All right, now I'm going on this right away with this very light blue, and I do know that, you know, some of my imagery is a little bit wet still, so it is kind of smearing some of it, but I don't know. That, unless it's really super wet and I'm getting these really bad streaks, I'm not really too worried about it, okay? Okay, now I'm using a color box stylus tool. You can use various things like stipple brushes. These are cosmetic sponges, and you can kind of sponge it down. What we don't want is, you know, we don't want to be too aware of the shape of this going like something like that. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of condensing my tapping in a given area. Now, here's the thing. This is the part that a lot of people find can be a difficult concept for them if they're coming into landscape stamping. A lot of times if you're using other types of imagery, like an outline design, you know, let's say they're filling in a, I don't know, a little figurine, and let's say the figurine is wearing a dress or something like that. Well, if you've seen areas where, let's say, they color the dress red or something like that, and then they give it a little vignette, they give a darker edge around that to make the object seem more three-dimensional. Think about that type of concept just being applied to a much larger area. So let's say this area up here in the sky is one little area, okay, of a given figure or something like that. I'm going to make some of this area in my sky a little bit lighter, and I'll have the area around it a little bit darker. So we're seeing this whole area in here as one kind of shape, okay? And you can see I'm just going right over my imagery. I don't have to mask anything off, all right? So that's kind of a strange concept, but if you think about it, it's the same kind of principle as what you've been doing, you know, with your pens, your colored pencils, your Copic markers or whatnot. And it's just being applied in a little bit of a different way for a different kind of a idea. So in this scene right here, you see where I've kind of just left a little bit of light like that? Just think about that as giving this area in here a little bit more dimension, okay? And that's why we do these things. We kind of darken the edges of our cards or something like that, right? A lot of times. Or objects, let's say you're doing a little embellishment and you have a little cutout. Well, a lot of times you make it a little bit darker around the edges Same idea. I'm just making this whole area around this a little bit darker. And what that does is we're kind of leaving in the middle here is our light source, okay? Or that's what it kind of represents when it comes to scenic stamping. Okay, so that being said, let's take a good glob of this ink and really lay it down around the perimeter, okay? I not only use color for coverage, okay? So this area out here is blue, but I really want to get that saturated with a good amount of that blue, okay? Because what it's doing is it's kind of coating the paper a little bit, so when I move up into my darker tones, medium to darker tones, it'll give me kind of a little bit of a wetter surface to use to apply those colors with, and they'll spread much easier than if the paper was completely dry. It is dry to the touch. I mean, it's not sopping wet or anything like that, but what we are is we're kind of, you know, making the surface and the pulp of the paper a little bit more damp, okay? All right, same concept down here. Think about the same area up here as being mirrored down in our water down here. So what I can do is I can put a little bit of tone on some of these rocks, okay? You don't have to stay within the boundaries of a certain shape or something like that. Light falls on landscapes differently. Certain areas are illuminated a little bit more than others. But you can kind of see our lighting scheme already kind of taking place, and we've only used one color so far, so we're establishing kind of a lighting scheme, okay? Now again, this is glossy cardstock, but you can do this on matte cardstock. What you have to do on matte cardstock is you kind of have to stay in an area a little bit longer and spread it out a little bit more like this, you know, because it is absorbing that ink faster. But we will do the same scene right here on some matte cardstock later on. So anyway, filling this in a little bit. Now see, by doing this, by adding in some tone on my objects down here, they seem to have a little bit more weight and mass and opacity by coloring them in. If you kind of leave them open but have the color running, you know, in other areas, these areas can seem kind of thin and empty. So you give them a little bit of mass, okay? Now, if you can see on my image right here, I've drawn this image with a lot of shading on it, with a lot of dots. Where you see it kind of darker on the image, apply a little bit more tone. See, I'm kind of holding my stylus tool at an angle. If you're doing it with a cosmetic sponge, you can kind of just use that edge right there and do a little coloring like that. And we'll use some markers too, but I want to do some, you know, take it one step at a time with a series of kind of a media exploration kind of techniques. So we'll do this and we'll add in some other types of media and other types of looks going forward, okay? But let's just keep this one really simple. All right, let's go to my Bahama Blue here. It's just a medium tone blue. It's like a, I don't know, what is that? Like, it's kind of like a royal blue, maybe a cobalt blue or something like that. Okay, now I'm just taking this in. Now see, I like these striations in my water, so a lot of times this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to do a little streak like that, and I'm doing that right here in my water. It's hard to tell. Okay, see, I'm doing this, so I'm getting a streak like that, okay? Now here's where you want to be careful. Don't see this as an area, don't forget this is an area that you want to keep a little bit of light in, so don't just color the whole thing in. And that's what a lot of people's inclinations are when they first start doing some scenic stamping, which is fine, you could do that, okay? But I just think it's kind of a more effective look, and it gives you a little bit more variety if you leave some areas light and get some areas darker. And see, that looks like some water to me. Let's put a little streak across there if you want to. If you're, you know, kind of worried about doing that type of streak in a light area, then if you want to use a light blue alcohol marker or something like that, put a streak of that with your alcohol marker, okay? Alright, let's add some of this tone up into my sky as well. Let's keep these streaks going. I think these streaks kind of added into the scene look really good. I kind of tilt my paper this way so that I can do a nice graceful streak coming in from the outside edge in, so I can get kind of this motion going. Just see, I'm kind of doing this in lifting, lift, touch and lift, touch and lift, okay? That's what I'm kind of doing, and then if I want to come into it from this side, turn your card and make it a nice ergonomic stroke for yourself, okay? I say that because a lot of people feel that they have to have it upright all the time, you know, like going like this, but this is kind of an awkward motion for me, you know, to do it like that. So I just turn it like this, and here's my hand motion, okay? Touch and lift, touch and lift. I'm kind of using the side of this too if I want a more narrow streak. Most of the times I'm not using the whole pad, okay? See this streak right here? If I want to build it up and make it thicker, then I just kind of have it on its edge and I just keep going over it. And I kind of keep moving it a little bit. But see, that's like that. It's like this flame kind of thing, because I'm always kind of touching it there, so it's getting squished a little bit more, and then as I come up, it's thinner, okay? So it's tapered. All right. Now this is just 2 colors of blue, but I mean, look at that lighting in there. It's, you know, it's not too bad just with using 2 colors. All right, now we have our rocks in here. Now I did put some blue over them. I tend to think that the colors of the sky are reflected in the objects down below, and if we're talking about some granite rocks, I don't know what they would be, but let's put a little bit of gray over them. London fog. Now, I don't know. This pad had this tip here had a little bit of ink on there already, so I think it was blue. So, anyways, it's not going to look gray because I already have blue on these rocks right here. But maybe it'll give it a little bit of a, you know, cool gray look, or you know, like a steel gray look, you know, with a little bit of that gray tone in there, just to give it a little bit of a variation. Okay, kind of hitting it in my shadows as well. Some of those rocks are, you know, they're being reflected down in the water. I can give that water right along the edge of the shoreline a little bit of that gray tone where it's reflecting those gray blue rocks, okay? Something like that. It's very subtle. I'm not going with a super dark gray right here. This is London fog. It's very light. All right. In the spirit of keeping this very simple, let's not go to too many colors, but let's add a little bit of variation in here. Sometimes that, you know, I love monochromatic looks, you know, in terms of just kind of describing light, but let's make this a little bit more interesting in terms of my color scheme working in here. And I need to... Let me see if I have a clean stylus tool tip here. Okay, these are very ancient ones. I can tell these ones are getting a little bit hard. These are probably 20 years old and been sitting around for a while. These sponge tips last really quite some time, but if they start getting a little bit hard, you know, you can toss them. But like I said, it'll take like 20 years for it to get that way. If you store them properly, you know, and take care of them. Okay. All right, here's my heart one. I don't recommend that, but just to show you that you can use just about anything, you know, to apply your inks with. I'll use that because that's my clean one that I have. All right, let's add a little bit of tone to that sky. Let's go with something like a very pale pink. This is kind of a rose pink right here. It's a little bit bright, so let me get some color on this, and let's really blot this off and make it very, very pale. Actually, I am a little bit worried about this one. This one was very bright. Okay, let's see. And I'm not using, I tell you what, let me take this. I'm going to flip this around this way. So I just flipped it like that. I have this box of stylus tools that I need to really wash out, and it would only take me a minute, but I haven't gotten around to it, so. These are unscripted, unplanned scenes that I'm always doing in these videos. I don't know. They are somewhat spontaneous, you know, I don't really plan it out. I plan out the concept, or I just, you know, I know I'm going to do some kind of scene, of course, but I don't know. I kind of approach these videos just like, I don't know, I think a lot of us kind of, you know, do when we kind of go into our craft room. We don't know maybe exactly what we're going to do. I don't know if you're following along and you're kind of replicating some kind of project that you've seen, you know, in a video or something. Naturally, you know exactly what you're going to be getting into, but I don't know, with these videos and with how I approach things, it's a little bit more spontaneous, okay? Alright, so anyways, see that little twist of my hue up there? We've kind of gone into pink, but where pink overlap the blue, we get these violets. So it's just a little bit more interesting that way, you know, to kind of twist and to extend our color scheme out slightly, okay? Let me add a little bit of this. You don't need to re-ink this. You really use kind of a very light version on here, which means very dry. So see that? I start streaking it in there. Can you see that right there? It's because it's barely visible on here, so it's very, very dry. But with repetitive kind of strokes or applications of a very dry sponge tip here, we get that little subtle colors, you know, and that's where you have a lot of control. Okay, now let me use the other side of this tip right here. All right. So see, that color is reflected now down in the water. And those kind of look like clouds to me, you know, so that's where the retention of some of your whites look really good. Now, is that a hard thing to do? It is if you're kind of have this fixed notion of areas being uniformly colored. Okay, there's sky, it's all blue, okay? And there's no whites left. But all you have to do is really, you just have to kind of retain that lighter area. It does take a, you know, sometimes a scene, you know, or someone to do it once, and it's like, I don't have any light anymore, and you just say, hey, just don't, you know, streak in. So if I'm watching someone in a workshop, I say, okay, now see that little area, don't add any more ink to it. And, you know what I mean, it's easy for them just to avoid it, but sometimes if they're just getting started, and then what they're doing is they're getting a feel for, you know, their application technique, you know, so they're thinking about it, they're saying stroke, 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 and sometimes they forget, and then they color it all in, but you know, it's a pretty easy thing to remember, you know, after, you know, doing one scene or something like that. And to try not to replicate things, the chances are if I did this exact scene again, it wouldn't look the same because I would add more of a certain tone or less of it, so they all come out a little bit different. In a case like this, it would look like a different time of day. Maybe it's, you know, further along in the day and it's 20 minutes later, you know, and it's darker all around. Maybe I brought in some of that darker Bahama Blue in here, you know, so, you know, the light is kind of disappearing a little bit or whatnot. Here's the thing, too. You see this little rock up here, okay? Well, let's say some of that kind of light, twilight, I get, it's kind of more twilight-ish, maybe. Color is reflecting on some of these rocks. It kind of gives, you know, your objects something in common a little bit. See that little bit of pink up on that rock now? It's subtle, right? You don't want it to be like that color of pink, but adding a little bit down there gives it a little bit of character, and it gives it something in common. Okay, now this scene right here I think would look good with some additional dark blue, or you can just stop right there, and that is your lesson for the day. But I don't know, let's see. Let's do this right here, just to show you. Now this is a Danube Blue, and it's working into from kind of a light, medium, and dark blue. let me just show you right here, okay? Let me deepen my shadows a little bit, and you can take a look and see what that looks like, okay? Now, here's my lesson for the day on dark tones, okay? Now, because they are so dark, this is where sometimes when people are doing this application, this type of application of color using something like a stylus tool, this is where they get an isolated tip like that. And it's usually right in the middle right here. It's because they've gone into it too fast, okay? And because the color, you could do that with this really light blue. You can go, and it's so light to begin with, it doesn't show up as much. But if you do that with this color, it's going to leave a big, obtrusive looking mark in your scenes. So that being said, when you're with your darker tones, you just stay on the outside edge a little bit longer, okay? Don't tap too hard either. Keep a nice light touch. See, this is what I'm doing right here. Let's see if you can see this right here, okay? Let me do this right here. See, this is a dark blue, right? If I put a big slathering of it down, it's very dark, right? But then here's my touch with this in my application process. Here's one tap. Okay, there it is. It's invisible, right? Adding a little bit more visible. More and more and more. It's getting a little bit darker, okay? Now see that? I mean, how many taps did it take to get that? And it's still, I don't know, 1/3 as dark as that. So that's where you have control over your darker tones and avoiding that shape. Now I wouldn't just stay in one spot and go tap, 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 tap. Oh my gosh, I got an oval shape right here. The tapping is kind of in the darker areas, okay? And I'll show you what this is leading to. Okay, see that darker kind of shadow down there? See how it kind of anchors that a little bit more? Or I can just kind of take it and add a little shadow kind of along the waterline. I'm using a very light touch, so it's barely showing up with each stroke that I make, because I'm using a very light touch. A lot of times what people do is they kind of go like that, and then there's like nothing showing, so they go squeeze, and then they get a big mark. Okay, so just keep with it, just add, I don't know, 20 taps if need be, okay? But see that? Kind of in my rocky area, see, there's a little bit more dimension that way, because I've kind of taken, and see this rock right here, these two? I'll put a little bit of tone along that one in the background, and it separates those two a little bit more. So like that down here. And I separate it with inherently in the designs I give. Designs light and shadow, but it's fun to reiterate that with some additional tone. Okay, now let's do this right here, and add a little bit of shadow in our shadow areas, okay? And the shadows again they're on the designs, okay? So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a mystery about where is it darker? Where do I add a shadow? Well, you just kind of follow the imagery. You can see that rock right there is darker, right? Because it's in the shade. So let's hit that rock. Well, maybe I stamped a lot of that rock off, but here I'll put a little bit of it down here. So do you see these rocks right here? See where the bottom portion is darker and the top portion is lighter? It's because I've taken my stylus tool and just tapped it down there, and I've added a little bit of tone. Okay, so let's kind of back up here and add a little shading in here. Just in a very light application. I don't know, it's taken me probably 10 strokes for it to start showing up, and I keep going, and it just gets incrementally a little bit darker with each stroke, and very incrementally, okay, it's barely shows up, and I'm starting off with a navy blue, right, but I'm not using the purest form of that navy blue in a very hard application of it. Okay, it's a very soft application of it. I mean, you can do this with black too if you want to, but see that? It kind of gives the body of water a little bit more of just that. It gives it more body and mass, okay? There's this little bit of a stronger silhouette down here, I guess. Something like that. Okay. This is my first scene of this kind of series, so I think I do want to use a little bit of this black right here. When I stamp out my imagery in black, I like to finish my shading with that same value. Okay, so it's stamped out in black. And again, it's just not this black, okay, it's that black, okay, which is kind of more of a gray, okay. Okay, and I'm hitting it just in my same areas that I did before, you know, so I'm just getting a little bit darker each time, okay. Alright, so we have something like that. We have a kind of a twilight or something like that over the lake. And that is the first type of look or personality of the lake. And give your scenes kind of some character. I designed the stamps to be, you know, I try to make them, I don't know, just the best version of that given type of design as possible, but it could be like a really nice sculptural form or something like that. But I feel that you as the stamper and artist, you know, what you do to a given composition kind of gives it, you know, kind of more of a, I don't know, metaphor would be like a beating heart. You bring it to life, you know, with color, with different media, whatever you choose, and that gives it kind of that imagery its own kind of unique personality, you know. Is it, you know, what mood is that scene depicting, you know, so you can infuse a lot of your own kind of aesthetics into your scenes through the given media that you're using and how you use that media. So we'll do a few more scenes using the dye-based inks and glossy cardstock, and we'll change the entire look of it. You know, maybe we'll go with something similar but more dramatic, something more kind of light and airy, you know, in terms of the look, but we'll stay with the same basic composition here. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this series going forward. We'll use various things, graphites, alcohol markers, we'll use multimedia, maybe some colored pencils or something like that, Conte crayons and charcoal, matte paper, and maybe some other types of textured papers. So I'm looking forward to this series. I've been thinking about doing something like this for a long time because people think a lot of times that scenic stamping is about a specific technique, but it's really not. You can use these stamps in with any media that you choose, you know. Maybe we'll do some embossing as well. Alright, so anyways, thanks for watching this first in a series. Hope you enjoyed it.